Welcome to the Virginia Holocaust Museum. Thank you for coming this afternoon. My name is Sam Asher, and I serve as the President and Executive Director of the museum. Today we commemorate Yom HaShoah here in Richmond, and we join communities around the world in doing so. I would like to begin today by welcoming some special guests we have, and as I read their names, I got to get my friend to sit down. Helena, you have to sit. Okay. As I read your names, please stand so that we can recognize you appropriately. Ms. Julian Seipzer, Office of the Lieutenant Governor, Chief of Staff. The Honorable Rodney Willett, Delegate, Virginia House of Delegates. The Honorable Mark Early, Delegate, Virginia House of Delegates. The Honorable J.D. Danny Diggs, Senate of Virginia. The Honorable Kelly G., Secretary of the Commonwealth, State of Virginia. The Honorable Jonathan Schleffer, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, Deputy Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. The Honorable Jessica Schneider, Chesterfield Board of Supervisors. The Honorable Schuyler von Valkenburg, Senate of the State of Virginia. The Honorable Betsy Carr, House of Delegates. The Honorable David Owen, House of Delegates. The Honorable Shannon Taylor, Commonwealth Attorney, Henrico County. Rabbi David Asher, Knesset Beth Israel. I know I saw you, David. There you are. I don't think I've missed any other rabbis. Are there any other rabbis here? Okay. Carol and Marcus Weinstein. Can I ask all Holocaust survivors and second and third generation survivors to stand to be recognized? Thank you. My friend Bill Martin of the Valentine Museum, Director of the Valentine Museum. All Board of Directors of the Virginia Holocaust Museum, please stand to be recognized. And Virginia Holocaust Museum staff who are all around the building helping, thank you for all you do. Now, I would like to take a moment to remember those who are not with us today. This year, we lost several people close to the museum who we would normally see sitting here in attendance, and they are truly missed. Honorable survivor Henri Meisels, museum patron and personal friend Mayor Binstock, and Amnon Weinstein, founder of the Violins of Hope. Let us take a moment to remember them and the lives lost on October 7 and in the fighting in the war since the war began. Thank you. In today's atmosphere of political, cultural, ideological, and racial divisions here in America, the mission of the Virginia Holocaust Museum has never been more relevant and vital to our society. The museum preserves and documents the history of the Holocaust. It employs the history of the Holocaust and other genocides to inspire future generations of Virginians to fight prejudice and all forms of indifference. The pledge of never again is made by all of us. We pledge to remember the Holocaust and pledge to continue Holocaust education through our Teacher Education Institute, small group tours, and our contact with many visitors and student groups. Everyone who visits the Virginia Holocaust Museum will learn about the horrors of the Holocaust so that it may never happen again. Yet, we learned of the barbaric acts of Hamas as perpetrated on the Israelis on October 7th, and now we see protests erupting on college campuses across America. We can't help but fear in the deepest crevices in our souls that we have fear for what is going on. We hope and pray for the return of the 130 hostages. Pidyon Shvuim, the freeing of the captives, is one of the highest values in the Jewish faith. And freeing the 130 captives is of the utmost importance. We pray for peace for all. We have hope, for we know that shining a light on anti-Semitism and hate through Holocaust education, our mission here at the Virginia Holocaust Museum, is one of the most important antidotes. There has never been a more critical time since the Holocaust to invest in what we do here 7 days a week. A new tool in our Holocaust education arsenal that I'm excited to report on today is our new Pepper's Ghost holographic theater, featuring our beloved friend and supporter and Holocaust survivor, Helena Zim. Helena, please stand to be recognized. Thank you. And now the good news. Construction began 2 weeks ago. It's closed upstairs because there's a lot of workmen, a lot of materials lying around, but we hope it will open and be functional and operational soon. The incredible teaching exhibit was made possible through your generous contributions and to our most recent capital campaign. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and I would now like to call on Carol Weinstein to award the prizes to the Visual Arts Contest winners.
I'm Carol Weinstein. Goodness, can you hear? You better be able to hear me. I don't want to touch them again. But it's always a surprise to see the amazing contributions these young people do for, and you can see the gallery over there, from middle schools and upper schools throughout Virginia. There are even some from farther away. This year, they had the theme to, I want to say, never again. That was the theme, but we all know that they went an extra step. They actually were asked to view the museum's collection, and they watched survivors' interviews, they read about their lives, and they looked at their family photos. It's just the art that they came up with, you must see. It's so high level for such young people. And also some of you have asked about, what's the title of the work and what does it mean? And you'll probably see over there underneath or by the first picture, the first artwork, you will see pages like this. They're the artist's statement, and they're very helpful and very moving. I am going to call out the names of each one and have them walk up as I call out their names, and afterwards they'll be presented with a certificate behind which represents a cash prize, which will be mailed to them, and then we will take a picture of everyone. So please help me honor these wonderful people. The first group I'm gonna call up will be the junior division, grades 6 through 8. Think about that. First prize, Sanjana Akunori. The second prize, Nave Bella Cruz. Third prize, Jillian Sheets. And as you make your way up here, I will mention that there were so many wonderful entries that this year we had to add an honorable mention, and for that we have 2 winners, Claire Teichert and Camilla Struckner. And in the senior division, grades 9 through 12, first place goes to Morgan Bell. Second place, Molly Janusek. Third place, Eva McKinley. And the honorable mentions in this category also, Reese Burrows and Julia Velasquez. Should we get these people over there too?
We're just getting them closer.
Okay, I'm gonna help guide this.
If you step up just a little bit.
Right.
Oh, you don't have room over there. I was gonna say that.
Just gonna squeeze in.
You guys squeeze.
I'll be on. We'll be on the.
Maybe if you guys want to bend down a little bit?
No.
Okay, there.
We'll
Okay.
get between you. You stand tall.
Okay.
Eyeglasses
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
I would now like to call on Rabbi David Asher for the invocation. Let us pray. We gather here today for this awesome and awful commemoration of Yom HaShoah 5784, 2024. On this day, we remember those who gave their lives for their faith and for their connections to our faith, including everyday citizens of good conscience who risked their lives and ultimately sacrificed their lives to stand up against the rabid hatred of the Nazis and their associates. It is often overlooked that anti-Semitism is primarily a problem of the non-Jews, for the Jews suffer from it against their will, and the perpetrators of anti-Semitism are either raised or reared or willingly opt into often the radicalized world of victimizing the Jews. Alas, we find ourselves again in an era of unprecedented Jew hatred. This is our first Yom HaShoah following the Butchers' massacre on October 7th. So let us lift our collective hearts up to our Creator in heaven and beseech the Almighty that our efforts
and the efforts of our elected officials and the efforts of our non-Jewish allies be met with favor in the eyes of God. May the Almighty enable us to end anti-Semitism in the classroom, both here and in the Middle East. May the world come to see that we, the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the Holocaust, have at long last helped build a Jewish sovereignty with religious freedoms and liberal values and a thriving democracy that recognizes the godliness of all peoples. May we Americans yet convince our fellow countrymen that we don't want to have police escorts here into our schools, guiding us into our synagogues, into our JCCs, and into our agencies. We wish to be free from the animus and the anguish that is this ever-widening violent discrimination. We ask all of this from you, God, so that we might yet be worthy, without harassment, to teach and to represent your values and the lessons of your word to all those the world over fortunate enough to seek the divine wisdom of the Torah. And let us say, Amen.
It is our tradition that we light 6 candles for each of the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust. I would now like to call Matt Simpson up, our Director of Guest Services, to assist with the lighting, and Smuley is going to help also.
Our first candle today will be lit by Mrs. Helena Zim. Helena was born Helena Drexler in Lodz, Poland. With false ID papers acquired by her father, Solomon, Helena survived the Holocaust as Wanda Kazushek and lived as a Catholic. Helena was employed as a housekeeper by a family who lived directly across from the Warsaw Ghetto and was a witness to its horrors and its famous uprising. Our second candle No. There's a cup of water. If you want to use it.
Put them in the water.
Our second candle will be lit today by Dr. Roger Loria, accompanied by his daughter Rachel. Roger was born in 1940 in Antwerp, Belgium. After being separated from his father, who was murdered at Birkenau, Roger and his mother were imprisoned at the Annecy and Rivesaltes camps, both in France. Roger and his mother escaped and ultimately survived the war in hiding in Switzerland. We invite Miss Inga Horowitz to light the third candle today. Inga was born Inga Windemüller in Beckum, Germany. Inga and her family spent 5 years under Nazi occupation before escaping to the United States. Inga has dedicated countless hours to preserving Holocaust history and promoting education through both the Virginia Holocaust Museum and Emek Shalom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery. The fourth candle will be lit by Mrs. Odette Cook. Odette was born to Hungarian parents on May 3rd, 1933 in Paris, France. Upon the Nazi invasion of France, Odette's family fled to southern France, where her mother was able to obtain Catholic identification for the children and later herself. This allowed them to survive the war. Neighbors denounced Odette's father as Jewish, and he was sent to Bergen-Belsen, but also survived, and the family was reunited in 1945. The fifth and sixth candles will be lit by second-generation survivors. We invite other second generation to join if they wish. The fifth candle, we invite Hannah Cohen to light the fifth candle. Hannah's mother was a survivor of Auschwitz, and her father was a partisan in the Carpathian Mountains. While fighting, his first wife and 3 kids were betrayed and murdered by collaborators. Hannah's parents met after the war outside Prague, where Hannah was later born, before immigrating to America. We invite Gabriel Laufer to light candle 6. And again, we invite any second generation to join. Gabriel's father was forced to work in Hungarian slave labor battalions near Stalingrad and in the Mühldorf concentration camp near Dachau. His father's first wife, half-sister, and paternal grandfather were murdered at Auschwitz. His paternal grandmother was killed by Hungarian fascists on the banks of the Danube. After the Holocaust, his father returned to Hungary, where he was born, before the family immigrated to Israel. May the memory of all victims be for a blessing.
Thank you all, Hannah, Odette, Inga, Gabi, Roger, and Helena, for helping us preserve, light the candles, and remember. I would now like to call on Cantor Berman from Beth Ahava congregation for the El Malei Rachamim and the Mourner's Kaddish, found in your program.
I ask those present who are able to please rise for our ancient memorial prayer, El Malei. God, filled with compassion, justice of widows and parent of orphans, please do not be silent or hold your peace for the blood of Israel that was shed like water. Grant infinite rest on the wings of your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, shining and radiating light like the first light of creation, to the souls of the millions of Jews, adults and children, who were murdered, slaughtered, burned, strangled, and buried alive. All of them holy and pure in your eyes, may they rest in paradise. Therefore, Master of compassion, shelter them in the comfort of your wings forever. May their souls be woven into the tapestry of life eternal, with you as their comfort. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Il malei rachamim, dayan almanot v'yitomim, amna techashevet itapak ledam Yisrael, שנשפך כמים. המציא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים. כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמת ונשמותיהם של רבבות אלפי ישראל, אנשים ונשים, ילדים וילדות, שנהרגו ונשחטו ונשרפו ונחנקו ונקברו חיים, כולם קדושים וטהורים, בגן עדן די מנוחתה. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, ינוחו בשלום, בשלום, בשלום על משכבם. ונאמר, and let us say, Amen. We continue reciting the Mourner's Kaddish prayer. The transliteration can be found in your programs. We say the Kaddish together as we remain standing. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach li'alam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei d'kudusha v'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Few people have experienced as much in their lifetimes as my friend Tommy Bayer. Born in Berlin, Germany, a U.S. citizen, he was able to escape Nazi Germany with his parents, settling first in Newport News, Virginia, and then Richmond after the war. There he grew up, fighting racial and religious prejudice and committing himself to community service in gratitude to the country that gave him life and opportunity. Tommy attended the University of Richmond, where he graduated with distinction, elected president of the senior class, and tapped into 4 honorary societies, including Phi Beta Kappa. He received his law degree at Georgetown Law Center, where he was a member of Law Review. After serving 1 year as a law clerk to U.S. District Judge, he was appointed Assistant U.S. Attorney by Attorney General Robert Kennedy. In private practice for more than 50 years, still practicing? Still practicing. Tommy has distinguished himself as a respected attorney. His civic activities are equally extensive. Among them, he served as the international president of B'nai B'rith, meeting with heads of state, ambassadors, and other foreign leaders. I could go on and on and on. But in the interest of time and getting you out of here and getting some dessert afterwards. Please give a warm welcome to Tommy Bear.
Several years ago, a friend of mine in Richmond called me. He was having difficulty in obtaining the restitution to which he was entitled as a Holocaust survivor from France. I asked him to send me the documents, and he did, and I reviewed them, and I thought that it had merit, and that his claims should be honored by the Claims Conference. And this had been going on for quite some time. So I said, well, look, let me call a friend in Washington, and let me see what I can do. Well, that friend asked to see the documents, and I did send him the documents. Within a month, he was receiving his restitution. The person from Richmond, Henry Meisel's of blessed memory, and the person who made it happen was our guest speaker, Ambassador Stuart Eizenstat. Over the years, I have had the honor and privilege to introduce presidents, prime ministers, ambassadors, and others. But I have never had the distinction of introducing one as credentialed as Stuart Eizenstat, one who has so dedicated himself over a lifetime to a career of public service on behalf of the United States and on behalf of the Jewish people worldwide. His achievements have been and continue to be remarkable. If there was such a thing as a Jewish Guinness Book of World Records, it would have to devote a chapter to Stuart Eizenstat. I only have time to mention some highlights of his career that spanned some 6 presidential administrations. Chief White House Domestic Policy Advisor to President Jimmy Carter. U.S. Ambassador to the European Union in the Clinton administration, and as well Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, Undersecretary of State for Economic, Business, and Agricultural Affairs, and Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. Special Advisor to Secretaries of State Clinton and Kerry on Holocaust-era issues. Currently Special Advisor to Secretary of State Blinken on Holocaust issues. As Special Negotiator for the Jewish Claims Conference, he has successfully negotiated major agreements with a number of European nations covering restitution of property, payment for slave and forced laborers, recovery of looted art, bank accounts, and payment of insurance policies totaling over $8 billion. He has received 8 honorary doctorate degrees, and my notes say 75 awards, and if you look in your brochure, it says 100 awards. So between the time I wrote my remarks and now, he has received an additional 25 awards, and among them the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's Elie Wiesel Award. He is the author of 4 books and numerous articles in a wide range of publications, and has a new book coming out shortly called The Art of Diplomacy. In addition to his international law practice at the D.C. firm of Cummington and Burling, among his other endeavors, he is the board chair of the Defiant Requiem Foundation, which honors the defiance and bravery of the prisoners in the Eizenstat or Terezin concentration camp during World War II. and shows the role music and art play in confronting contemporary challenges, including increased Holocaust ignorance, Holocaust denial, and anti-Semitism. And I can say with pride that I serve as a member of that board. And in 2022, he was appointed by President Biden as chair of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council. Under the Carter administration, he recommended the President's Commission of the Holocaust and helped draft the legislation authorizing the creation of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. I have had the good fortune of knowing Stu for over 25 years, and I now have the good fortune of introducing him to you, Ambassador Stuart Eizenstat.
First, let me start by recognizing the survivors here. You're an inspiration, and I can't tell you how moving it is to see you here. Tommy, thank you for that gracious introduction. You've been a great leader of the bar of the International Jewish and Virginia Jewish communities, and a great friend. Your wife Betty has been a friend as well. I had a wonderful tour through your museum earlier today from your great director, Sam Asher, who's done such a wonderful job of elevating this museum, and learned about the new exhibits that you're going to have, the new virtual theater, the hologram that you'll have, and it'll be very, very exciting. Tommy also had a very emotional experience when he got just recently a copy of his actual birth certificate in the hospital in Berlin. He had never seen his birth certificate before, and he and Betty found it and found the apartment where they lived. I want to discuss with you the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. Past, what led to the Holocaust. Present, what we're living through now, an unimaginable activity now in the United States. And the future, how do we deal with what we're facing now? I've made Holocaust justice and memory and its lessons a central part of my career. Let's first start with the past. Let's first start with the past. How did we get to what is shown so movingly in this museum and in the museum I chair in Washington? The Holocaust was a tragic example of the worst manifestations of anti-Semitism and racism. A Nazi ideology which targeted not only Jews, but Roma, the disabled, and others, who were considered an inferior race, in German, Untermachen, subhumans. How did it happen that in the most cultured country in Europe, Germany, a democracy, that lawyers and judges and doctors and academics violated their own oaths of office to follow this dark racial ideology down the abyss? For example, Erwin Bumke, president of Germany's Supreme Court, to be like our Chief Justice, joined the Nazi Party and abandoned the whole concept of the rule of law to become a compliant servant of the Nazi regime. More than half of German physicians physicians were members of the Nazi Party, and as early as the 1930s began participating in what was called the T4 Project, euthanasia, experiments on the mental and physically disabled people, non-Jews as well as Jews, who were deemed unworthy of life. We talk about the Nuremberg trials, and there's an exhibit in this museum of the Nuremberg trials. What's not known is that there was a Nuremberg trial of over 20 Nazi doctors called the Doctors' Tribunal. Nazi ideology didn't spring out of the ground or out of the heavens from nowhere. It was a continuation of 2,000 years of conspiracy accusations that accused Jews of orchestrating every evil that occurred in the world, of controlling key societal institutions, of somehow conspiring to run the world when we were less than 1% of the world. One of the things that gave a special impetus to the Naziology was a book that almost nobody knows about, published in 1903 by the Russian secret police, called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is a book that has had exceptional staying power. It's the one that accused Jews of running the world, of everything wrong with the world being at the feet of the Jews. That book was adopted by the Nazis. 23 editions were published. And where else was it adopted? In the United States of America by Ford Motor magnate Henry Ford, who had it translated and published in various languages. Joseph Goebbels, the master of Nazi ideology and propaganda, acknowledged that it was a forgery, but said the essence of it was true. And he used the modern equivalent of the internet. It was the radio, which was a new invention at the time, to spread the ideology behind the protocols, to spread this message of hatred. You know where else the protocols are found today in 2024? They're found in the charter of Hamas, by name. They're found in China, which is a driving force of a huge amount of online anti-Semitism in TikTok, and of course in Russia. Senate investigations and a recent 2024 State Department report again showed it was totally false. But Elie Wiesel had it right when he said, if ever a piece of writing could produce mass hatred, it's this one. Now, if there's one message that I'd like you to take away from the first part of my talk, and that is the past, how did we get to the Holocaust, it's this. The Holocaust was not inevitable. It was facilitated by the indifference of the world to the fate of European Jewry. The result in 1939, before the World War II started, there were 17 million Jews in a world of 1 billion. Today, because of the Holocaust, there are 15.7 million Jews in a world of 8 billion. But its loss of the Holocaust is not just in numbers. The 2/3 of European Jewry who were killed were the flower of Jewish history, Jewish culture, Jewish scholarship, Jewish art, and that's gone. When you see these pictures of these young kids, just think of what they might have contributed to the world. Hitler's original goal was not the final solution. It was not the final solution. It was to make Germany Judenrein, free of Jews. He wanted the Jews out of Germany. And the problem is the doors of the world were closed. to those Jews. He moved very methodically, step by careful step, to disenfranchise Jews, to deny them citizenship, the opportunity to practice medicine or law or have their own businesses. Very carefully gauging at each step what the reaction was in Germany and in the world. And what did he see? He saw in 1936 that there was no boycott of the Berlin Olympics, the famous Jesse Owens Olympics. 1938 was the pivotal year when this indifference came very clearly to Hitler's eyes. In 1938, with no meaningful reaction by the United States or the rest of the world, Austria was gobbled up in the Anschluss. The Sudetenland in the Czech Republic was taken, and the Munich Pact, where Chamberlain said Hitler will be through once this is done. Think of Ukraine today. The Avion Conference in 1938 in Avion, France, called by President Roosevelt to deal with the problem of German Jewish refugees. Not one country, including the United States, were willing to lift their immigration quotas to let in the Jews. And Hitler said publicly, it's clear the world doesn't care any more about them than I do. I'm willing to let them on an ocean liner to get them out of here. Kristallnacht, 1938. A furious pogrom with the arrest of 30,000 German citizens, Jews. Thousands of synagogues torched, businesses destroyed. Britain started the Kindertransport as a result, to get some kids out of Austria and Germany into England. We did nothing. We defeated a piece of legislation in the U.S. Congress, the Wagner-Rogers bill that would have allowed 20,000 German Jewish children in after Kristallnacht, and it was defeated in Congress. FDR was asked, what do you think about Kristallnacht, Mr. President? And he said, let the State Department handle it. And after that, Goebbels, the master propagandist, said, it's very clear. They criticize us about Kristallnacht, but they're not willing to take the Jews off our hands. The passivity of the Roosevelt administration and the active efforts of Assistant Secretary of State Breckinridge Long, and I served in the State Department for a number of years, and I know where his office was, kept as many German Jewish refugees out as possible. Why? Because, according to Gallup polls, in this era, over 40% of Americans had negative views of the Jews. Father Coughlin, a right-wing populist, spread anti-Semitic conspiracies on American radio. And FDR did not want World War II to be seen as a war for the Jews of Europe because he felt it would undermine public support for the war. Now, I also served as Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. And let me tell you an amazing story. 1944, just literally the office down from the one I had in the Clinton administration, the Secretary of the Treasury at that time was Henry Morgenthau. And his staff presented him with a report. This is a U.S. staff presenting to the Secretary of the Treasury in 1944 a report. And what was the title of the report? The acquiescence of this administration in the murder of the Jews, indicting their own administration. And Morgenthau went to the White House, which is right next door to the Oval Office, presented it to Roosevelt, That led to the creation of the War Refugee Board, which Morgenthau chaired. He worked with Wallenberg, Raoul Wallenberg, to save many thousands of Hungarian Jews, but it was too late. 431,000 Hungarian Jews in the last mass roundup were taken before the War Refugee Board could do anything. This gives us a critical lesson. Evil and aggression has to be nipped in the bud. If Hitler had been firmly opposed early on, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. On D-Day, and if any of you, I certainly have been there several times, to Normandy, to see Utah Beach and Omaha Beach and the cemeteries, it's the most moving thing I've ever been at with President Clinton on the 50th anniversary. By the time D-Day occurred, June 6, 1944, we've all seen these photos of the amazing bravery of our soldiers getting off and landing and that first wave being wiped out. By that time, June 6, 1944, 5 million of the 6 million Jews had already been killed. And then they had to work their way all across Europe before they could liberate anybody. The Holocaust was not only the greatest genocide in history, it was the greatest theft in history. The theft wasn't random. It was organized. It was an integral part of the Nazi plan to eliminate all vestiges of Jewish life in Europe. Root and branch, homes, businesses, bank accounts, insurance policies, personal possessions, instruments, artwork, 600,000 pieces of art, and tens of millions of books and cultural and religious objects stolen with the same efficiency with which they killed people. And they also worked to death slave laborers to help run the German war effort. Leading German banks and insurance companies became facilitators of the exploitation of Jewish assets. Large numbers of ordinary Germans purchased Jewish assets on the cheap, from pots and pans to rugs and furnishings. A significant part of the whole German war effort was financed by Jewish assets that were stolen. Second part, today, the present. Today we are at a perilous moment in Jewish history. The unimaginable is happening. Intimidation, threats of violence, actual violence is on the rise, including in some of our best college campuses. The Anti-Defamation League reported last year alone, 2023, almost 9,000 anti-Semitic incidents, a 140% increase over 2022. And the FBI, which does an annual report of hate crimes, said that over 60% of religious-based hate crimes were against Jews and Jewish property. ADL estimates that 30% of Jews experience anti-Semitic harassment online. And let me personalize this. Let me personalize it. When I was ambassador to the European Union, living in Brussels, and one of your survivors is from Antwerp, my wife and I used to go around to all the member states of the European Union, and we could always tell where the Jewish institutions were. The synagogues, like this recreation, the day schools, the community centers, even the cemeteries. How could we tell? Because there were always armed guards, whatever country in Europe. And Fran and I used to say to each other, thank God we live in the United States so we don't have to worry about that. Well, now, as the rabbi said, there's barely a synagogue, a day school, a community center that doesn't have a police protection outside. Amazing. Amazing. I went to Columbia a week ago Tuesday to see what was happening. I was let in by a professor. I couldn't have gotten in otherwise. And I saw 200 tents, and these were not makeshift tents. They were all identical. There was a food island, and these same tents are in other places. Somebody's paying for those tents. Somebody is organizing these demonstrations. And the professor told me that at 10 o'clock every night in Columbia, till 2 o'clock in the morning, these demonstrators, and this is not free speech, this is harassment, used bullhorns, drums, right next to the dorms where the students are trying to study and sleep. And then I talked to 6 Harvard Law School students, my alma mater, who talked about the intimidation they find at the law school, including by professors. We also live at a time of Holocaust denial and distortion made viral by social media and indeed by sheer ignorance. There are 245,000 Holocaust survivors, eyewitnesses alive today. Who is going to speak when they pass away? Who is going to be the eyewitness? Well, you're going to have a special exhibit, thanks to Sam and his leadership, with a hologram. But the point is that 60%, according to a recent survey, of those young people between 18 and 39 in the United States of America, 60% couldn't identify Auschwitz. And nearly a third of Americans believe that substantially less than 6 million Jews were killed. Anti-Semitism is coming both from the far right, nationalists like at Charlottesville, but also the far left. The far right at Charlottesville, with, including on January 6th, with jerseys saying 6 million was not enough, or Camp Auschwitz, and now the far left on college campuses, making them virtual battlegrounds. ADL has shown dramatic increases in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th. Around a quarter of Jewish college students report hiding their Jewish identity or refraining from speaking about Israel on campus for fear of retribution. Clearly, legitimate criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. Israel is a sovereign state, and just like we criticize our government, Israel should be criticized. But these attacks from the far left on campus goes far beyond this. The sign saying "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" effectively calls for the end of the state of Israel, the one Jewish state in the world. The overwhelming percentage of Americans and American Jews and non-Jews, according to recent polls, believe that is anti-Semitism. Now, we have a positive foundation to try to attack this. And here are some of the positives. And with this, I talk about my third point, which is the future. A recent March 2023 Pew Research poll, one of the most respected polls in the country, found that of almost all religious groups in the U.S., Jews were viewed most favorably by Americans. 35% felt very or somewhat favorable attitudes, only 6% unfavorable. Pew concluded that among all the religious groups asked about, Mormons, Muslims, atheists, Catholics, mainline Protestants, evangelicals, the religious group most admired with the most positive net rating were Jews. Whether Republicans or Democrats were asked as well. In addition, we have the foundation for dealing with this problem that the American Jewish Committee in a recent poll found 3/4 of the general public, not Jews, the general public, believed that anti-Semitism was a problem that needed to be dealt with and that it had increased over the past 5 years. 92% of Americans believe anti-Semitism affects society as a whole. It's not just a Jewish thing. And that everyone is responsible for combating it. Now, there are offensive and defensive steps necessary to deal with anti-Semitism. Like a football coach, we have a defensive team and an offensive team. On the defensive team, ADL is providing a new helpline for students experiencing anti-Semitism on campus. They've gotten more than 100 U.S. companies to sign a workplace pledge to oppose anti-Semitism. Well before October 7th, the Biden administration is to be congratulated for a year-long effort which led in May of 2023, and I participated in this, in the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, including 100 actions to be taken by every single department of the U.S. government, chaired by the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff. And again, I'm pleased to have participated in this. Just this past week, I participated in a meeting on implementing that strategy, which included the Attorney General, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Education, Deborah Lipstadt, and many others. It has 4 pillars: increasing awareness and understanding of anti-Semitism, improving safety and security for Jewish communities, reversing the normalization of anti-Semitism, and building cross-community solidarity. We can't take this on alone. There are ministers, Christian ministers, who want to be part of this, Catholic priests who want to be part of this, because they know that hate against Jews is bad for the country and for religion as a whole. The North American Jewish Federations have created something called Live Secure as part of this defensive element, in partnership with a secure community network and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, to give major grants out. And the Secretary of Homeland Security, whose family, by the way, was a victim of the Holocaust, provides over $300 million in this fiscal year to more than 2,200 faith-based and other nonprofit organizations, including the Jewish community, for hardening Jewish and other religious targets, paying for security, for example, at this museum. The Department of Education now has over 130 cases open under Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And it's important to understand that Jews should be a protected minority under Title VI, so that campuses which aren't protecting Jewish students should have their federal funds cut off under Title VI. And just this very week, with the bipartisan leadership of the Republican Speaker and the Democratic Majority Leader, the House passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Campus administrators are under great pressure, in part because the faculties are joining with the students. The faculties are joining with the students. This is happening at Emory, in Atlanta, it's happening everywhere. And because they call the police out after they've tried every other peaceful way to get these demonstrators out, the faculty wants to eliminate the presidents. There's a clear line between the exercise of free speech, however odious, and violating the rules of the university, by taking over school property, harassing Jewish students, and creating an environment which deprives students of a safe place to live and learn without fear. Now, our U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum is embarking on a special effort to combat anti-Semitism and Holocaust distortion. And this is the positive element. Defense is one thing, but you need an offense as well. And the offense is 3 words: education, education, and education. That is the key to combat hatred and anti-Semitism. Our museum, like yours, is being created. We have had almost 50 million visitors since we opened in 1993, and by the way, over 90% are non-Jewish. I see them when I go. These young school kids coming with their teachers, over 90% are non-Jewish. The average stay in a Smithsonian museum like Natural History or Air and Space is 1 hour. The average stay at the Holocaust Museum is 2 hours and 7 minutes. Kids are engrossed in this. They want to learn. And we have decided, with the $10 million we've gotten from Congress, with the Never Again Holocaust Education Act of 2020, again passed in a bipartisan way, to do something unique. So yes, we get thousands of visitors every day, but there are only so many people who can come to Washington. So we've adopted something called Beyond Our Walls. We're taking the museum outside of Washington. We've signed an agreement with the American Library Association, and now we have pop-up exhibitions in 100 cities and libraries, in small towns in the Midwest with no Jewish population. So we're going to them, not relying just on people coming to us.
In January 2000, when I was Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, we launched with the Swedish Prime Minister, Göran Persson, a global effort
to promote Holocaust education. Today, that is now in the form of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, with 35 countries promoting in their schools Holocaust education. We, the United States, have not done what we should, even though we helped initiate it, to lead the effort. Only 22 of our 50 states have any mandatory Holocaust education. We have developed an outreach program to teachers. We're bringing in several thousand each summer for museum tours. Not just a 1-hour tour, but for actual classes to give them curricula to teach. Do you know that every new FBI agent, every new member of our military academies, West Point, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, and the Coast Guard Academy, comes for a several-day program? We have an agreement with Fort Leavenworth, and we take in mid-career officers to come in for several days. And I heard one major say he had tours of duty in Iraq, and he only wished he had had this course beforehand to know how to deal with civilians at a time of war. We're also taking steps to get these young kids down to the age of 13. Kids don't learn the same way I did or you do. They learn by social media. And we're developing special social media tools to reach kids. We're monitoring, along with ADL, the internet, so that when false statements are made on the internet and go viral, we immediately put on content contradicting that, so that they don't get just one side of the story. So we're trying to use every modern tool we can to bring accurate information. We're even translating things into Persian to bring to Iranians, to try to escape the censor by using the VPN. We've got a Holocaust encyclopedia that you can find by a Google search. And it has had 28.6 million visitors 1 year, 2023 alone. So if someone wants to know anything about the Holocaust, when did it happen? Why did it happen? How many people? How many survivors? Any question, you can go online to the Holocaust Encyclopedia and get the answer. And again, we're rethinking social media strategies to reach younger teenagers beginning at age 13. Reaching students in middle school and high school is more than important than ever, because by the time they come to college, it may be too late to shape their thinking. There's some good news, because the demand from teachers across the U.S. for our services has increased dramatically since October 7th. Although teachers report increasing incidents of students with skepticism about the truth of the Holocaust, the teachers are determined to develop the curriculum to teach it. We're creating networks of teachers across the United States, in all 50 states, and in now 49 countries. This summer, starting very shortly, we'll have several thousand teachers coming into the museum for a several-day conference. Many young people today lack historical perspective. That's why the museum is approaching Holocaust education in a new way. And we're starting something else. The permanent exhibit at the museum has been there since 1993. It's outmoded, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of the message. And we're redoing, over the next 5 years, an entire rethinking. We've already hired a firm, the one that, if you saw the War Museum in London, where Churchill used to spend the war years, the same architect. Because what we want to do is not only describe what happened, but why did it happen? Why was it that a cultured country could abandon democratic principles? Why was it that doctors and lawyers and physicians and academics and judges abandoned their oaths of office? And what can be done about it? There are many lessons of the Holocaust, but perhaps the most timeless are those that help people understand how and why it happened. The fragility of democracy, the dangers of unchecked anti-Semitism and hatred, the power of propaganda, and the possibilities for choice. One of the things that's so beautifully laid out in your museum with the rescuers is that there were choices. One of the survivors I just met spent several years in the home of a non-Jewish person who was willing to risk their lives. When I was ambassador to the European Union in Brussels, I was invited to a ceremony in the State Senate of Belgium. This was like 1995, 1996, to give awards by the Belgian government to people who hid Jews. 50% of the Jews in Belgium were saved. 75% of the Jews in France were saved with 3 years of German occupation. And as these people came in this ornate State Senate building to get their awards, they were very average people wearing work boots and khakis. And I remember looking at each one of them and saying to myself, what was it about that person that allowed them to make the choice to risk their own lives and their families' lives to do the right thing? So we want young kids to understand as they educate that there are choices in life. And it's important to make the right choice. So the situation we face today is indeed very difficult. But we have the tools and the commitment that didn't exist in the pre-Holocaust era to combat this. The battle is being joined, and it is a battle. And it's a battle I believe we will succeed in. Empires which have tried to destroy the Jewish people, from Babylonia to Rome, from Greece to the Ottomans and the Nazis, have had their day and they've disappeared. We are still here. Our survivors are here. We're here in Richmond, Virginia, May 5th, 2024. And we're going to continue to be here, and we're bringing this fight to the American people who want to be joined in combating hatred and anti-Semitism. That's the message of Yom HaShoah. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, thank you so much. The message is amazing and so important for today, and we will take up the cause. We will continue with our cause to fight anti-Semitism, to fight hatred, and to fight indifference. We have a present for you today, which is a block of wood made out of one of those timbers, and it has our Holocaust Museum emblem on it, and it says tolerance through education, and that's what we have to do. So we thank you so much for being here and helping us. Well, thank you all for being here. I think we had a phenomenal meeting today, and it's now the most important time for us to go get refreshments and lots of desserts. We thank you all for coming, and please come back again next year.